Hello friends, welcome to my channel Learn with Reshu. In this tutorial, we'll understand what a spring factory bean is, and we'll also understand some of the concepts that are fundamental to spring. In my first tutorial, I told you that when I talk about the first thing that normally comes in my mind is, or in mind is dependency injection. And the whole dependency injection concept is possible because the spring is actually a container of beans. The spring behaves as a factory of beans. So what do you mean? What do I mean by the container? So what do you mean by a container? So suppose we have a container. So you can take an example of a servlet container. For example, Tomcat. With this servlet container, what does that mean is, Tomcat create the servlet objects which are required in order to run an application. So, for deploying an application, that what you do is you can configure a servlet in an XML and you would supply the classes. Now, what Tomcat does? It reads the XML and then it identifies what are the services, what needs to be instantiated, and when it creates those servlets. Like the XML file is known as web.xml. So I have told you this servlet explanation in my servlet JSP tutorials as well. So if you want to know what is servlet and how Tomcat works, you can go to my tutorial and have a look. But come to the point. So spring is something similar. It's container, like a Tomcat container, but it's not a container of servlets. It's a container of beans. So pretty much like any pojos that you have and can contain inside a spring container. So you can have a spring container, and inside this you can have as many objects as you have. You can, like all these objects managed by the spring container. Okay, so in the sense it handles the instantiation of these objects. So spring container handles the initialization and instantiation of these objects. Okay. And it handles the whole life cycle of the objects, and it handles also the destruction of the objects. You can of course have objects outside of the container as well in your application, but adding the object inside the servlet container so that Spring manages the objects and gives you lots of advantages. Now, what are the advantages of having our objects inside a servlet container? We'll have a look at that in the subsequent tutorial. But the point is here is, we are learning Spring and we are implementing Spring in order for Spring to manage our objects life cycle. So I say this object here, I want to manage the whole life cycle. It's obvious the Spring needs to handle on this object. Spring needs to know what the object is and where it is. The way it works in order for Spring to manage the object life cycle is, suppose we will look into the factory pattern. So suppose you have an object, and for instantiating the another object, what you will do is you will have a factory object. Like in this object factory, you will have you can create and instantiate a new factory object or a new object and give it to this object. So how we will create a new object in this factory object? What we will do is this factory object will read some configuration. So this configuration can be in the form of XML or some metadata. The configuration file will be a blueprint of object. So what it does is in the factory object, to give the new object to this object, what will the factory object will do is, it's basically a factory of lots of objects. So it creates instantiate new objects and give it to the other objects. So what it does, it reads the configuration, for example by XML file, and reads the configuration and create a new object, and after creating the object, it will hand over to the object this object. So what it means, like this object does not need to create new object. It just call the object factory, and this object factory, by reading some configuration, it will create a new object and hand it over to the object. So this is called the factory pattern, and this is how Spring works. In Spring what happens is, in Spring Bean Factory we have an object, for example, and we have a bean factory. So in bean factory there were lots of beans we can generate. So the Spring Bean Factory generate lots of beans by this bean factory class, and this bean factory class will read some spring.xml file. So we have a spring.xml file. If we follow the bean factory pattern, so we can follow the XML file, Spring XML configuration. So this file will be having some bean information like properties, or like which type of constructor, or everything information related to bean. So it will be looks like a blueprint of bean, and by the using of this XML, the bean factory will create a bean and Spring Bean, and then it hand over to the object. So this is the concept of Spring Bean Factory. So that this object should not create an object by new keyword, or it just ask, hey Bean Factory, I want a object of Spring Bean, and then this Bean Factory will read the XML configuration, create a Spring Bean, and hand it over to the object. So this is how Spring Bean Factory works, or Spring works. Here I am explaining Bean Factory, but there are many ways to approach this concept. Like to get this concept, we can have application context way as well, where, and so basically Spring creates object by three ways. One is XML, another is annotation, and third is Java classes. So these three steps I will explain all in detail in my subsequent tutorial, but in this tutorial I wanted to explain you the Bean Factory concept, or the factory pattern. So that's why I explained this to you. Now I will explain the code example, like how this all things works in a code. So let's have a look. In order to see the Spring Bean Factory concept, what we need to do, we need to have a project. So we will create a simple Maven project, and then we choose a quick archetype because I want a simple project, and then I will give a name to the project like test demo or something like that. So test demo. So like this. Okay, and finish. So it will create a project for me known as test demo. Now in test demo project I have a class called app, and there we have a main method. So what I need to do is, we have I have, if you see my previous video on dependency injection, I have given you an example project. Like if we have if we want to print, for example, a triangle or a circle, so we should how we use dependency injection. So suppose we have two classes. One is triangle, so we create a first class which is known as triangle class, and we will have another class known as circle. Okay, so we have circle class and triangle class. In circle class we will going to have a method known as draw, and in this method we will going to print like I am in a circle. Like this. And in same in this method I will write, like for example, I am in circle. Okay, and the another method in the another class in triangle I will have the same method, no, for triangle. Okay, so so we have two classes, circle and triangle. So for calling in this app main class, if I want to create run this application or want to print like a triangle or a circle statement, then how we'll do is we just create, for example, a circle cr equals to new circle object, and then we will do cr dot draw. So this is how we will create an object and run and print the statement or call the draw method. But we are not using here Spring. So how we will use Spring or a bean factory to create the object? Simple. If we comment it out this first, and what we will do is we'll create an object of bean factory. Wait, for creating the object of bean factory, we need to have the files or the jar files in our system. If you see here in Maven dependency, we have only JUnit, so we do not have Spring jar files. So for getting the Spring jar files, what you can do is just open for example Firefox and write Spring Maven and click enter. So you'll get Spring Maven repository, and here you will go Spring context, and you can choose, for example, 5.2.5 release version. I can copy this and go to my pom.xml and just paste it, and then it's just it's done. So what we'll do is I will save this file, and it will load all the Spring jar files in our project. You can see here. So now I can use Spring configuration in my project. So what I will do is in app class I will create a bean factory. And if you'll see here, we can import a bean factory class from Spring Framework bean factory package. So here we'll see bean factory and equals to new, and then bean factory we can create bean factory in many ways, but here I will create bean factory by using XML bean factory class. So we'll say XML bean factory, and what we'll do is we'll see if we can open yes, XML bean factory, and it's deprecated. So it's deprecated because it's old, like it is no longer used nowadays. But I wanted to explain you the basic concept of Spring bean factory, and that's why I have created this code here, or I am explaining this code to you. So here you basically use the XML bean factory, and you create here file system resource spring.xml. So hold on, we do not have a spring.xml file. So where we can get the spring.xml file? So what we do is we can go to source main, and we can create a different package like this. And here in Java I remove this Java, and instead of Java I will write resources, resources, and finish. So I will have a resources folder, and in this resources folder I will create a XML file. So I will write XML and XML file. Okay, next, and I'll give the name to this XML file spring.xml, and next, and then so here we have created a spring XML file, and now what we will do is we will add a doc type. So I will add a doc type to this spring XML file so that it can work for beans. Okay, so basically I am adding this bean library path to this XML file, so that when we write, for example, beans, so it will understand what I am writing here and compile it. So I will write here beans and then bean, and inside this we can do like this. So inside this bean, what I will do is I will give an ID, and ID will be, for example, triangle, or we can give circle as well, triangle, and then we will give a class here and the class path. So what is the class path for triangle? I will copy the class path, or like I will give directly here. It's source name, package name, sorry, package name. We need to give a package name. So for triangle, the package name looks like this: com.reshu.testdemo triangle class. Okay, so this is the package and this is the class name, and the reference of this class is triangle keyword. So ID is triangle. So when we use this spring.xml file in our project, in our main method, so here also we are explaining here only, we are writing here only spring.xml, but we are not giving the path. So we need to give the path of this spring.xml file. So path is source, main, and resource. So I will give the path like this: source, main, resource, spring.xml. So now I have my bean factory can fetch the information from this spring.xml file. Now what we will do is we just create a triangle reference, and for example tri, and we'll call this bean factory, we'll call this bean factory here, and then dot get bean, and we'll take string argument, so this one. And here we'll provide, what we'll provide is, we'll provide this class ID. So what is the ID of this class? Is this triangle. So I'll copy this and will paste here. Now what's the error is showing? It's showing it needs to be cast to the triangle, because we are giving a reference to the triangle. So what I will do is I will directly cast it to a triangle. So that's it. And now I will copy this triangle and we'll call this try.draw. So what will going to happen is this try.draw, it will draw the triangle. Let's have a look. So I'll run this code. Okay, and I am in the triangle because here was triangle. Same we can do with we can create one more bean here and change it to the circle, and class will be circle. And then in app.java, the main class, I will do the same thing and just replace this triangle to circle, and here we will put circle. Okay, and then if I put cr.draw, so it will give that, it will print the circle statement. I am in triangle, I am in circle, because here try.draw and cr.draw. So you see here, we are not creating the circle cr.new circle. We are calling the XML file to get the circle object. So we are referencing here circle. That's why we have casted the circle with this object. So you will think, you all were thinking like, why we use this all stuff to get an object only instead of just calling the new keyword. Because if we use a new, it will be totally dependent, tightly coupled. But you know, it's a very simple example like triangle or circle, but it can be a very heavy class, a very big class, a very lots of code in that class. To instantiating that class is just, we need to fix a bean here in the bean spring.xml or whatever the name we can giving this XML file, and then we can create a very perfect object here without doing anything more. And by this reference we can create as many as object in the whole project. So that by this way, if we in the future, if we want to upgrade this project, we just only need to change this class name, package name, and we can have the same references if they want, or the references. So it will be a less change in the code instead of a big change, or like we need to all the points we need to go and change and look where is the new circle, and then we need to change. Instead of this we just only need to change in spring.xml file and our work is done. So that is the way we can achieve a dependency injection. So what we are here is doing, what this is doing is, it is injecting the dependency, the circle dependency or the triangle dependency. It's injecting in this class, app class. So that is why it's called dependency injection. And we can achieve, here we are achieving this dependency injection by XML bean factory. We can achieve in the next tutorial. I will explain you how we can achieve this by annotation and Java classes. So please keep watching. In my next tutorial I will explain you how to achieve dependency injection in Spring with application context. Okay, so I think you understand the concept behind bean factory and how bean factory works, how Spring container works. And that's it for today. Thank you very much and keep watching, and please subscribe my channel if you haven't subscribed. Thank you. Bye bye.